And here's the really important part. It's not up to us. If Japan and Korea don't want to buy our coal, there's nothing Barnaby Joyce can do about that. What are we going to do, stockpile it? Are we going to keep mining it, make mountains of coal to ski down? Like, what is it we're planning to do with coal if our customers don't want to buy it?
One for Mum, one for Dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
Dead, buried, cremated.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. Won't hurt.
Australia's basically done for. We'll just end up being a third-rate economy. You know, a banana republic.
How good is Australia?
Just follow the money.
G'day and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast demystifying the big economic issues in Australia and putting them in plain English. I'm Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Institute, and today we're going to be talking about the University of Newcastle's decision to appoint Mark Vaile, the former Deputy Prime Minister and Chair of Whitehaven Coal, as its new Chancellor.
As I'm sure you know, the former Deputy Prime Minister Mark Vaile was to become the new Chancellor of Newcastle University.
So Mark Vaile stood down from his role as the incoming Chancellor of the University of Newcastle because the anti-coal mining lynch mob ganged up against his appointment because he's chairman of a company which is a coal miner.
They were all upset about the links of Mr Vaile with the fossil fuel industry.
Newcastle University Students' Association, some millionaire donors to the university, some community members.
People power, that's what did it. As a former student and a graduate at Newcastle Uni, I for one am very glad that...
As the chair of a major coal mining company, there are questions of conflict of interest, given the University of Newcastle's stance on climate change.
And he's the latest person to be cancelled.
The appointment sparked controversy, to say the least, amongst staff, students, alumni and philanthropists. And in the end, Mark Vaile chose to step down from that role. So today we're talking to our chief economist, Richard Dennis, himself an alumni of the University of Newcastle and one of the many people who publicly objected to Mark Vaile's appointment, for the inside story. G'day, Richard.
Hey, Eb.
So firstly, you studied at Newcastle University. Is that where you did your economics degree?
Sure did my economics degree up there and then went back years later and lectured economics up there for 5 years.
And you've said to us many times that you graduated in the middle of a recession. What were your options kind of growing up there at the time?
Well, yeah, look, I mean, no one from my school really went to uni. I didn't even know how to find my way to the uni, and I had a great time at Newcastle Uni, but yeah, I finished in 1991 and yeah, it was not a good time to graduate. So the options were to go to places and print out lots of job applications. Remember printers?
I do.
And post off hundreds of job applications, basically none of which people bothered to reply to. It was terrible.
And so when did you hear about the appointment of Mark Vaile as Chancellor, and where were you when you heard?
Well, where was I? I remember I was sitting at home and an email came through from a friend saying, is this a joke? And I didn't know what they were talking about. And I went online and, yeah, sure enough, the new Chancellor of my university was going to be the chair, or simultaneously the chair of Whitehaven Coal, the sort of biggest pure play coal company on the stock market in Australia, the Whitehaven Coal that had just been to court fighting against a class action from school children saying that building new coal mines, the Whitehaven new coal mine, Vickery Creek, was basically going to cause them damage and climate change. And Whitehaven, of course, vigorously defended the right to cause climate change in the future. And, of course, the same Whitehaven Coal accused of stealing 1 billion litres of water during a drought. Like, I just, like everybody in Newcastle, couldn't believe it.
Yeah. And you took some fairly decisive actions there. What did you do in response?
Well, at first I just sat there feeling angry and frustrated and sad that a university in this day and age would make that decision. I just kind of I don't know. Like most people thought, why do people do things like this? But soon after, one of the members of University Council, one of the academic appointees, or actually elected representatives, Jennifer Martin, quit the council, saying that she had concerns over the process. And of course, no one knew anything about the process. I just thought that everyone else up there thought it was a great idea.
Yeah.
And I felt despondent that I was so out of touch. But it turned out the opposite was the case. It turned out that it was the council that was out of touch. And it turned out that members of the council themselves were so disappointed that they'd stepped down. So as soon as I heard that, I felt much better, and I didn't feel like I was imagining things. And I was awarded Alumni of the Year for National Leadership by Newcastle Uni back in 2017. And I thought, well, if Jennifer Martin can step down off council, what can I do? So I decided to hand back my Alumni of the Year award.
A couple of academics resigned positions, and Australia Institute economist Dr. Richard Dennis went as far as to send back his university medal for leadership in protest. They were all upset about the links of Mr. Vaile with the fossil fuel industry.
Donors to the university, some community members, and of course Richard Dennis from the left-wing think tank, the Australian Institute. Can't forget poor old Richard.
What kind of reaction did that get, Richard?
I must admit I was surprised. I kind of thought, well, this is just what I have to do to make myself feel good about this. But, the Newcastle Herald ran a giant photo of me looking very sad, holding my trophy, and I wrote an opinion piece explaining why, and it's probably the most popular thing I've ever done on Twitter, which may or may not tell us something. I don't know. Maybe I should do more things more often. But the reaction was overwhelming. My phone rang off the hook from former students, from people I'd gone to uni with staff that I hadn't heard from in decades, saying, thank you for doing it. And, I was humbled by that. I kept saying, well, look what Jennifer Martin did. She still works there. She's just resigned from the council. It seems like the least I can do. But a lot of people wanted to find a way to express frustration. And I think after I did that, a lot of other people started to contact the university, and the Newcastle Herald were, it's great to see how a regional paper is still so important these days. The Newcastle Herald was running these stories front page for weeks because the community was interested.
Really cared about it.
They cared.
You obviously, as you were saying, weren't the only one who had concerns. There were things like open letters. As you've said, there was a lot of staff pressure as well. What are some of the other reactions that you heard about?
There were reactions everywhere, and it was wonderful. So the student union organised protests and delegations, and that again attracted media attention. The staff on the staff intranet were sort of scathing about both the appointment and again the process for the appointment, and all of those comments sort of wound up in the public domain. A large group of philanthropists did something that very unusual really, but basically wrote a public letter saying, we're philanthropists and you're free to make whoever you want the Chancellor, and we're free to decide which unis we'll be giving money to. And if you think that the Chair of Whitehaven Coal is the guy that captures the vision for Newcastle Uni's future, kind of don't come asking us for money. Even after Mark Vaile stepped down, it becomes apparent sort of what else was going on. Just in the paper today, a whole group of conjoint appointees who teach in the medical school, so effectively doctors who volunteer their time, were on the verge of writing to the Vice-Chancellor saying, we won't volunteer and teach your medical students if this is the kind of uni you want to be.
Well, climate change is obviously a massive public health issue.
Enormous public health issue. And so is the air pollution from coal mines. So is the dust.
In Newcastle,
in the Upper Hunter. The doctors know this. So, the Newcastle Herald's still covering the story even after Mr. Vaile stepped down. And, today's story is here's this giant list of academics who are just about to write to the Vice-Chancellor. So while supporters of Mr. Vaile have suggested that there's some small group of activists, and we should talk about what activist means, by the way. I'm not sure. We're all supposed to be democratically sedentary. I'm not quite sure why activist is a bad word. But the defenders of Mr. Vaile, and more importantly, the defenders of the very tin-eared decision of the University Council to appoint him. I mean, we should actually be more critical of the council than Mr. Vaile himself. I mean, he didn't make himself the offer.
That's right.
A whole group of people
had him put into that decision.
Exactly. So I think they're the one whose judgment really needs to be in question. But yeah, so defenders of that decision have tried to suggest it was just a small group of angry people. But yeah, students were upset, staff were upset, alumni were upset, philanthropists were upset. The Newcastle Herald obviously thought it was a big story. Local ABC obviously thought it was a big story. And, you know, I'm quite confident in predicting that public sentiment up there was hostile to the decision, which again is different from being hostile to Mr. Vaile.
Yeah.
He didn't appoint himself. Why would the University Council think that a university that's got a 100% renewable energy target, that's committed to net zero by 2025, that's positioning itself in the eyes of students, in the eyes of community as leading, as kind of leading the community, why not just appoint the guy who's the chair of a coal company, but the coal company that's fighting school kids in court, the coal company that's stealing water in a drought?
Yeah.
You know, it was a silly appointment, and that's what I think the backlash shows, that most people agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, a short time ago, ABC reporter Ben Millington spoke to Mr. Vaile following the announcement.
Look, I've taken the decision to decline the invitation to be the next Chancellor of the University of Newcastle. During the course of the last 2 weeks since the Council's decision was announced publicly, there's been an unprecedented and unjustified campaign against this appointment, led by minority groups, placing ideology before proper governance. And I've just taken the view that it's in the best interest of the university and the communities that it serves if I decline the invitation and withdraw from the process.
He's also the former Deputy Prime Minister, so he doesn't come without connections and things like that. Obviously, there's been a backlash to his appointment, and I'm guessing there's been a backlash to his decision to step down.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's had all sorts of powerful friends come out and say, oh, why are people cancelling Mark Vaile? This is cancel culture. How can this happen? Well, let's be crystal clear. Mark Vaile wasn't sacked. I didn't sack him. The students didn't sack him. He quit. The University Council offered him a position, and once that decision was scrutinised, once he was asked and the university was asked simple questions like, isn't it a conflict of interest for someone who's the chair of a coal company that wants to build new coal mines to be the chancellor of a university that says it wants to divest from fossil fuels? Isn't that a conflict of interest? Please explain. He quit.
Yeah.
And I think he made the right decision. I actually think we should applaud him for quitting, because I don't think that decision to appoint him made a lot of sense. So a lot of people want to say, he was cancelled and this is everything that's wrong with Australia. No, this was a conservative institution appointing a conservative former politician, chair of a coal company, to an important position, and a whole bunch of people in the community saying, please explain. And they didn't explain. That's not cancel.
Yeah.
That's not cancelling.
So I guess to get back to the idea of why this appointment was inappropriate, you've talked about, obviously, Whitehaven Coal's role in pushing for a new coal mine, but can you put that in the context of what's happening in the Hunter at the moment?
Yeah. So in the moment, in the Hunter Valley, the Upper Hunter is the most intense coal production area in Australia. And New South Wales, where the Upper Hunter sits, is the biggest kind of coal state in Australia, and Australia is, of course, one of the biggest coal exporters in the world. So the Upper Hunter is kind of coal central in the world in some sense. It's the most coal-intense region in the most coal-intense state in from an export point of view, one of the biggest coal producers in the world. So the transition that's going to hit the world is going to hit the Upper Hunter and, in turn, Newcastle and New South Wales harder than anywhere else. So we've just had a G7 meeting where all the G7 leaders are saying we're committing to net zero. China's committing to net zero by 2060. All of our big coal customers are saying we are going to not be burning as much coal in the future as we are now. This is called a market signal. It is quite clear.
For those of us who didn't study economics.
Exactly, right? Our customers are saying, I'm not going to keep buying as much of your product. No one's saying they're going to stop buying it all tomorrow. No one said we should shut the coal mines down tomorrow, but all of our customers are saying we're going to buy less of that stuff. Now, right now in the Upper Hunter, our research at the Australia Institute has found there's 100 million tonnes of spare capacity in the existing coal mines. So the existing mines aren't even running very hard.
Right. So when you say spare capacity, they could be producing more, but they're not.
Exactly. So the mines that are there today could make an extra 100 million tonnes a year of coal if they could sell it.
Yeah.
But they can't. And you know what? If they tried to produce that much coal, there's not enough railway line to get the coal to the port. And there's not enough port to get that much coal out onto the ocean. So why, when the rest of the world is saying we plan to buy less coal, and why, when the existing coal mines are massively underutilised, why on earth are we building new coal mines at the moment? It makes no financial sense, it makes no economic sense, but it's become a political symbol. And unfortunately, Mark Vaile's appointment as Chancellor of the University of Newcastle was rightly seen as a symbolic appointment. That's what the Chancellor is.
Yeah.
So it was as if the uni was saying, we're with coal expansion at precisely the time the rest of the world is saying, boy, there's a big future in renewables.
Yeah. We are in the middle of this transition. The Australia Institute has called for example, a moratorium on new coal mine approvals while some type of regional plan is put in place. But to be clear, other countries are sorting this transition in different ways. Germany, for example, moved out of coal-fired power stations, I think, without sacking a single worker. So it's not an impossible task that we've got ahead of us.
No, it's not impossible. And here's the really important part. It's not up to us. If Japan and Korea don't want to buy our coal, there's nothing Barnaby Joyce can do about that. What are we going to do? Stockpile it? Are we going to keep mining it? Make mountains of coal to ski down? Like, what is it we're planning to do with coal if our customers don't want to buy it? Now, we're busy in Australia telling ourselves things like we're leading the world in renewable energy, and we're simultaneously busy telling ourselves all the other countries are making stuff up. They're not really transitioning their economy. Well, according to the pinko lefties at the OECD and the IMF and the International Energy Agency, they are. There's data on this. We're not making it up. So our customers are telling us we're going to buy less of your coal. Our customers are currently investing in renewable energy and other ways to reduce their demand for coal. And we can ignore that if we want. We really can. We can build new coal mines if we want. We really can. But we can't build new customers. It's not how many mines we build that will determine how much coal the rest of the world buys of us. And of course, building new coal mines right now actually hurts the workers in the existing coal mines. So we're going to open up the Galilee Basin in Queensland. It's never mined a tonne of coal since Federation. So if we're going to build new coal mines up there, guess what? They're going to take customers away from the coal miners in Newcastle. So ironically, the best way to help the workers in existing coal mines is to not build new ones. But here we are, using new coal mines as some sort of symbol of commitment to the Australia of the 50s, when the world is saying, boy, this renewable energy is getting cheap.
These 7 teenagers have taken the Australian government to court.
Where they're suing the Federal Environment Minister because we're arguing that she has a duty of care to protect all Australian children and young people from the impacts of climate change.
Which is going to try and hopefully will restrict her from approving Vickery's coal mine.
And just for people who aren't aware of that court case that you've been talking about, what is that about, and what was Whitehaven Coal's position there?
Yeah, so a group of school children and a nun basically sought an injunction to stop the new Whitehaven Mole Vickery from going ahead on the basis that the Environment Minister, the Commonwealth Environment Minister, didn't consider the harm to young people of climate change associated with the mine. Now, I'm no lawyer, but the judgment was very interesting. The judge didn't grant the injunction, didn't stop the mine going ahead, but agreed that the Environment Minister needed to consider this kind of duty to avoid harm on future generations. And basically, while the mine is still getting built, the Environment Minister is now kind of reconsidering the decision and has to basically come back and say, I have considered this duty and I still think it's a good idea, or not.
Yeah.
So we haven't heard what the Environment Minister is going to do with this, but the court cases, what the federal court found was that building the mine will cause a small but measurable increase in climate change, and that will cause harm to future generations, and that harm was not considered when the mine was approved. So there was Whitehaven showing up to say, no, don't worry about any of that. We've got our approval. Don't worry about future generations.
Yeah.
You know, we've got plans in place to suppress dust and plans in place to, remediate the site when we're finished. Don't worry about the climate change stuff. Leave it with us.
Really, really scary to think about the future and not know whether we'll have a safe time.
I'm also concerned about how it's going to affect my rural family members and their incomes, and just generally the ability to achieve my dreams in a world that might have a lot of difficulties.
So we're filing for an injunction to stop the Federal Environment Minister from being able to approve this Vickery coal mine. So it's just about this one project, but it could create precedent that can stop future coal projects, which is really cool.
So, yeah, it's a very important court case, and the judgment's very important. But more importantly, from the Newcastle University's point of view, there was the chair of a company demanding the right to build new coal mines at precisely the time in world history where the International Energy Agency, let alone the climate scientists, are saying we don't need more coal if we're going to reduce emissions. And I think that's why it was so controversial.
And just to finish up, what message does this send to other universities?
Well, I think the message it sends to everybody is speak up. Don't let them cancel you. Don't let them cancel your concerns about your institutions, your government or anyone else. Because, again, my first thought was, I'm alone.
It's just me.
It's just me. Just sitting here doom scrolling on Twitter. No, actually, it turned out I was in the enormous majority. But until brave people like Jennifer Martin spoke up, I didn't know that. So I think it's really important that we realise that we shouldn't be cancelled and our opinions shouldn't be silenced, especially in a democracy with a government that says it cares about free speech. And look, I think other universities and other institutions, will be looking a lot harder now. Good. They should. These are important positions, and they've often just gone without a lot of thought to someone with good political connections and the hope. How pathetic that might shake a bit of cash out of the government. Like, how embarrassing if that's the motivation, or this person's a well-connected business person. Maybe that'll be a good way for us to get some donations or something. Again, how pathetic. We should be proud of our universities, and our universities should be proud enough of themselves to want to have a leader that really does send the signal about how the university sees itself. And if that's caused a few recruitment panels to have a second thought in Australia, great.
Although, having said all that, it is very difficult times for universities at the moment, certainly in terms of funding, being excluded from JobKeeper and whatnot. I'm not sure.
Unis have to think long term.
Yeah.
They have to think long term. And I think when Newcastle Uni realised that its decision was potentially going to hurt its philanthropic donations for years to come, and that its potential student base was going to be affected for years to come, and indeed one of the other groups that were concerned were foreign students who've got enormous choice, not just around the world but within Australia. And if Newcastle Uni wanted to be the coal university, maybe, I don't know why they appointed Mr. Vaile, but if they thought maybe he'll get a bit of money out of the government for us, again, how broken our policy must be if that's how it works. But if that was the thought, I think they realised we might lose even more from students and philanthropists.
Thanks, Richard. That's all we've got time for today. This episode was recorded on Friday, the 2nd of July, and things may have changed since recording. You can visit australiainstitute.org.au for all our latest research, including on what's happening to coal mines in the Upper Hunter. We're on Twitter at the Oz Institute with an AUS. My Twitter handle is Ebony_Bennett with a double N double T, and Richard Dennis is at RDNS_TN. TAI. This episode was produced by Jennifer Macy, and our theme music is by Jonathan McFeet from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. Stay safe out there, stay active, and thanks for listening.